morning.
Morning. How's it going, man?
Good. Well, as good as it can be when we're all very sick right now, unfortunately.
Oh no, you got that flu that's going
We've
around, huh?
we've caught that tall flu, that bus flu.
Oh man. I apologize and thank you for the time and toughing it out and giving us a few minutes here.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. Of course, of course.
So, dude, a brilliant album, number three, and loving it. Want to get into that and the tour and look in the rearview mirror a little bit. But let's get into this new album, man. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Ra.
hmm
And hooked up with Josh Wilbur for this one. How did that happen? And when, where, and how? Why did that all come together with Josh Wilbur?
Yeah, so I think us we went through, sort of had we met up and had interviews and had choices across, a few different producers when it came up into the, preamble to making this album, and obviously budget confinements and things like that. And Kerry King actually had just recorded his album that we're touring right now for him with Josh.
Oh, wow.
So Josh was freshly on our management's mind because we have the same managers. And so we were sort of tossing and turning, and then they just went, "Well, what about Josh Wilbur?" And then I think there was like there's no way, Josh is expensive and blah, 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 blah. But then they said, well, if you don't ask, the answer's always no, kind of thing.
Right.
And so we reached out with what our budget, restraints were. And he said, yeah, let's do it. That would be great. So we were like, hell yeah, let's go. So, but it was very late. Like I think we'd had a phone call with him once, and then we went on tour and we had like a 10-minute phone call with him on tour, and then we recorded the album. So we sort of had barely met the guy. We were not even entirely sure if we'd get along, yet, because there was nothing, because it was such a last minute change. But thankfully by like day two of the actual recording process, we all got along, like we've known each other forever, which was awesome. So then it made the whole process very easy, one that we would happily do again.
Yeah, man. I mean, he's got such a great, like, I almost want to say fat sound, especially for a three-piece band, man. The sound is filled out and it's big and thick and there's no space in there at all.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he's definitely, you know, taken to, because there was definitely some things in this album that I think were kind of new territory for him. Well, obviously the language thing, but that doesn't really matter, like, because it's still just vocals. But we have our sort of traditional instruments, and then the more like haka type vocal stuff in there. So like the big group vocal stuff, that was kind of new territory for him, that he was able to kind of play and push and pull. And then there's the kind of, we like to sort of, at least on this album, we really wanted to sort of drive a cinematic experience with the songs. So then there's the kind of sound effect type stuff that
Yeah.
we have happening in the album as well, just to kind of help sell the story and the feeling that we want for some of the songs as well. So all those things combined, and then of course, because you just got guitars, bass, and drums, kind of, yeah, lended itself to a really full sounding record, which was awesome. But he also, you know, was we gave him sort of free reign as well. We said there's a few things about our sound that we can't change. And one of those, for example, was like when we sing our Maori choruses,
Mhm.
it has to be the three of us doing the harmonies, not just Lewis harmonized, himself. Where the English songs on this record are just Lewis harmonizing himself for a sort of a cleaner sound.
Mhm.
But the Maori songs, for example, are always the three of us individually, so that it sounds like different people. But other than that, we were like, hey, guitar tones, whatever you see fit. Bass tone, he completely changed the bass tone up, which was way dirtier than it has been on the previous records, and I loved that sound. And the drums, actually, I think are pretty similar to what we're used to, but we did use Josh's kit for the most part of it. Henry did take his snares and things like that. But so that was the other part as well, was we were so open to his suggestions. And when you're working with someone like that, that's the would be the smartest thing to do, is not work with someone of that caliber. Like, actually, we know better than you do. So he just had a field day, I think, just running in there and, making it sound as great as we all feel like it sounds.
Speaking of working with people on the new album, dude, really cool to get to work with Randy Blythe on the new album and do a song with him. And curious, obviously, Josh Wilbur's got a long history with him too. Was he the one that made that phone call or suggestion, or were you friends with
Well,
him?
the
Or
surprising thing is we had reached out to Randy probably like 6 months before we even knew we were working with Josh.
ah,
How that went down was Randy follows us on Instagram as individuals. And we had this other song actually that we wanted him on originally when we had our demos. And I was kind of sitting there going, man, I feel like the song needs something. What is it? I was like, well, maybe it's another vocalist, with a different sound. I was like, who would be a good fit? And, we'd been touring with Brian from Knock Loose. We've been touring with Knock Loose. So Brian was like an initial thought process that we had. And we kind of tried to imagine it in our heads. And then I went, no, it needs to be actually the other end of the scale, like down and like
yeah,
really.
yeah.
And I said, wow, Randy, I was like, why not? He follows us after all. And then actually, before I then finally reached out to him, we had the band has had a documentary being filmed about them for the past like 7 years. And it's finally finished within the past couple of years. And when we saw the final cut, we were surprised to see that Randy was in it. So the producer actually reached out to Randy, and Randy like is featured in the documentary heavily talking about the band. But and that was like a surprise. They sort of kept that as a surprise for us. So when we finally saw it, I said, oh, well, if he knows us enough to happily talk about us for 20 minutes in a movie, then I feel like I should reach out. So I actually was the one that reached out to him on Instagram, but I didn't tell the boys because I was like, if he
Oh,
says no,
wow.
then, if he says no, then they don't need to know about it. But then if he says yes, given that particularly Lewis, it's his favorite band of all time, then it'll be a great surprise. I was like, Merry Christmas, Lewis. And Randy said, yeah, man, send me through the song, and if I think it's appropriate for me, I'd happily do it. So I said, sweet. We'll keep that in the back of our minds. And then, yeah, like I said, like probably 6 months passed in the back and forth, and we had plans change and whatnot. And then we decided that we were working with Josh. So it was kind of like, oh, well, this is going to be perfect now because, but what Josh did was he actually changed the song. So he actually ended up going, I think we should put Randy on a different song. And so it ended up being Honey Father song that he is on the album. Um, but of course, where Randy lives, so we never actually got to see Randy during that process. We'd done the album, and then Josh flew to Randy's home and recorded it in his house from there. But Randy loved the whole process, and he was texting. I had his phone number so that he would text me, and he was like, because he really wanted to make sure that like he wanted a few Maori words in there because it's a bilingual song. And so he was like, "Oh, is it okay if I sing some Maori words and can check my pronunciation?" So he was like fully in, and it was really awesome. And it actually turned out even better than we had hoped, considering it was a song that initially we weren't even, it wasn't the song that we thought we would have him on, and so it actually ended up being a better song for him to have him on. I think so. We're stoked for it.
Well, yeah, it's a killer tune. And dude, speaking of legendary people, and mentioned it a little bit earlier, you're out there on the road now opening for the legendary Kerry King. I was going to say, take me through that phone call, but I imagine it was a little bit, it wasn't quite as shocking being that you share management with him.
Well, what was surprising, so there is a funny story about this. We were on our European tour, sort of middle of last year, and we were playing. I can't remember the name of the festival. I think it's Nova Rock, which is in like Austria or Czech Republic or something, somewhere in that side of Europe.
Hmm.
And Kerry was there, and we had shown up to the festival, and we were talking with other bands, like not Kerry, and these bands were like, "Oh, I hear you're going out on the road with Kerry King next year. That's pretty cool." And we were like, "What? Uh, I haven't heard about this." And then they didn't believe us. Like they thought, and they were like, "Oh no, we get it. If it's not been announced, you can't say anything yet. La la la." And we were like, "What?" we were confused because we were like, we actually have no idea. This is the first we are hearing of this. And then later in that festival, Kerry came up to us and he was like, looking forward to having you guys on the road next year. And we were like, what? How does everybody else know this but us? But turns out because we were supposed to have a meeting with our manager a week later in London, and he was going to surprise us there. But I guess
Ah,
Kerry was already too busy telling everybody else at the festival about it. So that was quite a funny little way for us to find out. Because apparently he actually he chose us. So it's a coincidence that
wow.
we have the same management. But he was like, no, I want them and Municipal Waste, to be the openers. So that was cool.
Yeah, great lineup, great album that he put out, man. I mean, From Hell I Rise is phenomenal. Love that band and what Mark Segata is doing vocally with that band. Woo!
They sound so good and they're really great live. It's a really, I've started to appreciate it even more, like watching the album live now every night as well.
Yeah, I got to see him over the summer with Lamb of God and Mastodon, and it was such a tease to just see a little opening set. So
Yeah,
looking
I
forward to
saw
the
that. I
horn.
saw their show of that lineup in Los Angeles actually,
Yeah,
which was the only time we saw Randy before he recorded his part because that was like right after we'd finished the album. And I saw that show there and caught up with him backstage.
same.
It's a great lineup.
Yeah, yeah. And dude, when Raining Blood kicked in, that pit, it was just exploded.
Yeah, it's great.
To appreciate all the time, man. Last thing I'd hit you with, man, we're an old school radio station. We do a feature called Mandatory Metallica every night at 10 p.m., which you're going to be a part of. And I need your help in this little Metallica debate I've been having with my buddy and I. We're kind of debating their greatest thrash metal album and coming down on different sides. So I wanted to get your pick in this debate.
You are talking to possibly the only metal band member in existence that has never listened to a Metallica album in his life.
What?
Not a single one from start to finish. Only songs here and
Wow.
there. And I've seen them live now, like 2 or 3 times, like at festivals that we're playing at, but I've never listened to an album start to finish.
Wow. Blowing my mind
I
here.
know, and it normally does because every now and then an interview will be like Metallica, and I'm like, wrong person to ask.
Dude, you've got to. I mean, Cliff Burton alone should be a reason for you to go listen to some Metallica.
Right, right. But then, of course, the funny thing is I'm not. Yeah, I am a bass player, but I'm not really a bass player. Like I'm a guitar player, so like bass was just the job available to me. So like I'm much more off looking at the guitar players when it comes to bands.
Well, just to have some Metallica fun, is there a song that comes to mind? Is there one that sticks out, one that you like, the one that
Yeah,
you
I always did like For Whom the Bell Tolls, because it kind of goes back to what I was mentioning before about this album is one of my biggest inspirations, still one of my biggest inspirations in music is Hans Zimmer, for like film score, because film is actually one of my passions more so than music, which surprises a lot of people.
Wow.
But one of the reasons I'm so heavily into film is because of the scores. And that is a big thing about why I like that cinematic, what makes something feel cinematic. And For Whom the Bell Tolls with the bells.
Yeah.
For me, I can see what that song creates as an image. So that's always been one of my ones I like.
Beautiful, man. Thank you so much for the time and the brilliant album, and I'll see you at that Fonda show in Hollywood.
Sounds good, man. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.